Hi guys, Shikai here, and super excited today to bring an all-star panel. Well, I think it was called App Chains, but I think we kind of have a good blend of basically builders of chains, right? We have Jiho building Ronin, we have Jin building Saga, we have Sota, well, from Startail, which is building Sonium,
Yeah.
right? And of course, Avril building Neutron. So I wanted to start with actually bringing us together with, I think, somehow the common goal among all of us here is that there are many builders and I guess infra builders especially who are focused on the tech side of things, of like, hey, like how do we make things improve by the next be it scale or modular or whatever. I feel that all of us here actually are focused on adoption, and that's a message that I've heard consistently from all of us here. And I think this later part of the event today is actually focusing more on the apps, including the next panel as well. So really starting to get into that groove. And when we talk about apps, it's more of the human side, the consumer side, the user side of things. So I'd love to kick it off with the origin story of how you came to build your chain and its mission. Joe?
Sure.
It's going to take an hour, but
All right, let's do this. Let's do
summarize,
this.
yeah.
All right, so I'm Jiho. I'm a co-founder of Sky Mavis. We're the inventors of Axie Infinity as well as Ronin. So I actually was interested in crypto since 2013, but I was never interested in building in crypto until I discovered CryptoKitties, right? So I grew up as a gamer. I grew up as a collector. And from an early age, I knew that games could be a compelling way to introduce people to a new technology. The first meaningful thing I ever did on the internet was play StarCraft against my cousins in Korea. So when I found CryptoKitties, and I was like, okay, this may be my catalyst. This might be my moment to be at the ground floor of a new technology, to become an entrepreneur. And so I actually discovered Axie Infinity, like many community members, and fell in love with it. I fell in love with the art. I fell in love with the initial community. It was only 20 people, but it was a solid crew. And from that moment, I just started to do work. And in the early days, it was very slow growth. I made it my goal to try and onboard at least one person per day. And I think after a year, we had around 360 users. So mostly held up. But blockchain scaling was very primitive at that time, right? We knew from our days in CryptoKitties that we would have to scale this thing eventually. If we were successful, right, we could just suffer the same fate. So scaling was top of mind from the beginning. And there weren't many blockchain gaming scaling solutions at the time, right? So we were actually going with Georgios' solution, which was Loom Network. But we learned a hard lesson, right? You don't want to build your startup on top of someone else's startup, right? There was a lot of communication issues. The team, right, had varying morale based on the market climate, right? So we realized, hey, like, we are in a good position to actually build this thing ourselves, right? There's gonna be a need for a gaming chain, and we were on the ground floor of the industry from the beginning, and we had all these specifications that we actually really needed and that we felt like nobody was gonna build for us, right? So that's where the idea of building Ronin came out of, right? And I think it was validated where when we migrated from Ronin, when we migrated Axie to Ronin in March of 2021, we had around 16,000 DAU on the day of the migration, and that quickly skyrocketed within 6 months to around 2 million. So yeah, that's basically the story of Ronin. Now it's about way more than Axie, and we've had the second game, Web3 game, to hit 1 million users was also built on Ronin, right? That's Pixels is kind of like Stardew Valley. So yeah, that's the story, and that's basically how we decided that we needed to build our own chain.
Cool, wonderful. My story is a little bit, it's on the other end. It's from the infrastructure side. So app chains is something that introduced me to crypto, actually. So I started with Cosmos, which is one of the first kind of app chain infrastructure protocol. And I was there for the launch of the Cosmos Hub and all the different Cosmos chain, including Terra Luna and all the fun stuff happening. And one of the things that I've realized during my journey in Cosmos and app chains is app chains suck, right? Like it's really hard to actually, and you would know, to build your own application, your own chain, deploy it. There's like 900 different things you have to do in addition to just the technology and just the actual chain. And even though the vision of app chains was kind of front and center and we always knew why app chains is the future, convincing anybody to actually build their own app was like, it was not going to happen. And so one of the things that I did is, look, how do we kind of like re-architect this whole thing such that we're not kind of pulling our teeth out trying to convince people to build their own app chain, but making app chains as easy as deploying on someone's like layer one, essentially. And so that's kind of the vision of Saga. We spun out essentially from Tendermint in 2021, which is the company that built Cosmos originally, to help seed out Saga, which is like I would say like almost like a reinterpretation of how to build an app chain ecosystem that's more centered around how to make it as easy as possible to use.
Cool. So the background of the original story, right? My name is Sota Watanabe, CEO at the Startail, and the Startail is building the chain called Sonium together with Sony Group right now. We launched a brand 2 weeks ago, and we launched a testnet a week ago, and we're gonna launch a mainnet in coming months. So it's pretty new. But we started making a blockchain back in 2019 under the name of Asta. And I think we made a lot of the mistake, and I learned a lot from the history. So previously, we have been making the chain, then tried to find a solution. And we worked on ZK, because ZK sounds cool. I think a lot of the project just follow the narrative, and we follow the narrative. If we choose ZK, the valuation can be higher, something like this. This is a huge mistake, by the way. So, including us, a lot of the project try to find the problem after making technology, after making solution. This is the huge mistake of the project. And what we learned is we should start from problem. But the question is how to identify the problem. Web3 people like us does not have enough user touch points, generally speaking. So only rich people and tech people are using crypto today. Only less than 3% of the people are using crypto and Web3. If we have 50 people here, only only one person is using crypto. That's the reality, right? And we needed to go beyond Web3, and we needed to talk with remaining 97% of the people. Then I think we needed to identify the problem. And that's why we changed our strategy. And our first priority is securing the distribution channel to speak with potential customers. I think we envision the world where the people are using Web3, just like internet of today. They don't need to know TCP/IP protocol, HTTP protocol. They are using simply because the internet is so convenient and cheap, free for users' perspective. But when it comes to Web3, people have to understand which blockchain to use right now, how to install MetaMask, how to install wallets, and how to buy crypto, right? This is impossible for ordinary people. So what we want to do is to secure the distribution channel and distribute Web3 technology to the mass. I believe that Web3 technology needed to be something which empower the ordinary people, especially weak people, right? But right now, what we are creating is Web3 technology to empower rich people and tech people. This needed to be changed. And that's why we have been working with a lot of the company which has distribution channel. And this is the background, the reason why we launched Sonium together with Sony Group. Thank you very much. Spicy?
Yes.
No,
I like
spicy.
the ZK one.
Yeah.
For the valuation. That was a good one. That was a good one.
Fair.
Yes. All right, Evro?
Yeah, on our side, what we so like I think your take about like you need to start with an actual problem is kind of like valid. I think I definitely have seen this a lot in the market. On our side, it was pretty easy to come up with a problem because prior to building Neutron, we were building an application that itself was pretty successful. It was called Lido on Terra. It was the largest like liquid staking protocol on the Terra blockchain. Obviously, the choice of blockchain, okay, maybe not the most sustainable one. And so, we got to $10 billion TVL. It was bigger than Lido on Ethereum for a while, but then the blockchain crashed. And so we went back to zero pretty quickly. But in that sort of like, year and a half, 2 years of like working on growing this product, we did identify a bunch of the problems that, Cosmos and like the best teams in Cosmos were kind of like faced with, which is, on the one hand, as a smart contract builder in the ecosystem, you were kind of like a second-class citizen, whereby most of the infrastructure, which makes Cosmos so appealing, which is IBC, kind of like access to like consensus and these other like deeper kind of like properties of the stack, were completely inaccessible for you, right? So like you're building a smart contract, cool, you can do IBC transfers, but that's it. Like any sort of like more advanced functionality is something that will build kind of like more convenient solutions for in like a year or two or something, if we think about it. That was one. And then the second one is kind of like, as you mentioned, right, like having your own chain, unless you have a really clear reason and like business case for why you actually need it and how you're going to actually sustain it, is just a terrible idea or a terrible place to be, right? And so these kind of like few, and the reason why it's a terrible place, sorry, because I'm just like saying this, but like the reason why it is terrible is, one, it increases your overhead tremendously. So like now, instead of focusing 100% of your time on your product, you're spending at least 50% of that on coordinating with validators and like other infrastructure providers, and you're like designing, like you're keeping up with dependencies of like four different teams and security upgrades and whatever. And so all of this is like a pretty massive distraction. And then it also has a cost, right? You're now paying 100 plus entities to run your code, which is fine if you have tremendous revenue and you've already reached product market fit, but that's not the case of like most early stage projects, right? So going there from the get-go is kind of like something that I think has contributed to the death of a lot of projects in Cosmos, whereby like you just ramp up the incentives initially to get these validators in, and then you don't reach product market fit in time, and that can really impair your product, right? So these were the problems that we kind of had identified as builders prior to starting to build Neutron. And we were asking ourselves the questions, cool, we wanted to make Lido on Terra this cross-chain liquid staking protocol that would provide liquid staking for any chain that had POS back in the days, but it was impossible to do so without creating new types of infrastructure that wasn't available. So should we just make a chain for that one product, or do we think that these challenges that I've just mentioned are something that are shared by other ambitious builders in the space, which we believe is the case, in which case what made more sense is to like create this infrastructure, this stack, and make it available permissionlessly to any builder in the space. And this is so like how Neutron came to be, right? So take all of the good things about Cosmos, package them nicely so that people can take them to market like much faster. Yeah, that's kind of that was kind of the story that we went through.
Thank you. All right, guys. We talk about users. We talk about adoption, and it feels vague. It feels like this fluffy concept. I feel like I can't see it yet. So can we do a little exercise? Can we like just close eyes for just a few seconds and visualize? So if a blockchain is a city, if it is a network state, and there are users living on your chain, right, in this city, what do they look like? Who are these people? What do they look like? What are they doing in this city? What are they interacting with? Are they skyscrapers of big businesses? Are they small businesses? What kind of everyday things do they use in this city? What does it look like? So make it real for us. Who wants to start?
I mean, on Neutron, there's a bunch of like salamanders and ducks just interacting with a bunch of, I guess there's a stock exchange. There's a bunch of banks as well. There's ponds of liquidity on some places, and so I guess like they're just having fun, kind of like going in between these things and stuff. They are waiting for like a collectible shop that's opening pretty soon, and they're excited about that. But yeah,
What do the users look like?
ducks and newts.
I mean, we have to distinguish between end users and developers, right? So there's it depends on what you're talking about. The way that we think about Saga as an infrastructure is we're like the infrastructure builders. And so our direct customers, not customers, but builders are all developers, right? And the idea here is they're users of that developer, right? And so if you want an analogy, usually the way that I mention it is just like AWS, right? AWS has B2B customers that deploy on AWS, but those websites and those projects that are on AWS, there's millions of customers underneath. And so there isn't really that's like asking, what does the day-to-day user of a AWS cloud infrastructure look like? It looks very different depending on what application you have on top of that, right? And so some folks are there going to be gamers who are interacting with the cloud platform, and other folks are going to be financial platforms that fintech platforms that sit on top of it. So I don't think there's I would say almost everything in the world can fit as users on top of a blockchain ultimately, if you kind of think about it in that lens.
So you reject the question.
I reject the question.
And I see Gio kind of shaking her head a little bit.
I think it's totally wrong to believe that developers are going to be your first customers for a blockchain. And I think that a lot of people in this space, apps chains, infrastructure, have basically gone down this road, and that's why they're failing. And that's why we have no everyday people using crypto in this industry, except for in a few bright spots, Ronin being one of them. Because the developers want users. So we come from gaming backgrounds where we grew up as gamers. When you think about bootstrapping a developer platform, the first thing that you need is a hit consumer app that will bootstrap an initial cohort of users, and then you can get the developers to come onto your platform, right? So it's totally wrong to envision your first wave of customers being developers, right? So we don't think of ourselves as a B2B business, and we don't think of ourselves as a purely B2C business, right? We are a B2B2C business, right? But we bootstrapped as B2C, right? That was the big role of Axie Infinity in bootstrapping the Ronin chain, is we were able to aggregate this initial cohort of users and via incentives, right? So another thing is, like, I'm probably the only non-engineer on the stage. When I came into crypto and when I learned about crypto initially, I thought that it wasn't for me. I thought it was like for people who knew how to mine Bitcoin themselves. The thing that was interesting to me about CryptoKitties was, hey, hear me as a gamer and as a collector and someone who was a biology champion in high school, I now have some advantage, some way to potentially earn crypto that it doesn't seem like the engineers are going to be taking all the money. And right, so to me, that was the whole kind of first principles behind play to earn. If we have developer incentives, nice. We have enough fucking developers in crypto. You want safety? Yeah, these blockchains are pretty secure, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, pretty secure. They're secure enough. What we need are users, right? So why don't we apply proof of stake, proof of work, these principles to user adoption, right? And that was basically from first principles, right? The idea of using tokens as incentives to bootstrap your first group of users, because then you can piggyback off that to finally get some developers afterwards. But the consumer adoption must come first.
Can I jump in real quick? I have a bit of a question because I think I generally agree with a lot of your takes. I do have a question about how do you actually balance this, right? Because using incentives to bootstrap a user base and the initial loops in the game is very valuable. But I think just like in DeFi in games, it can get to a point where it cannibalizes the game itself. It can turns it into purely a machine for profit that is a job to most people rather than a game. And I think sometimes there's a balance point that you want to find so that people continue to enjoy the game as a game, and so that your DeFi flywheel doesn't turn into a collapse kind of. How do you find that, or how do you approach that?
DeFi protocols, layer ones, they overpay, right? They overpay incentives for a lot of things, right? So it's also the same thing with games, right? There will be games that are overpaying with incentives. That's actually one of the things that we sometimes will point out to our game studio partners building on Ronin. Are you guys thinking about how to be as efficient as possible with your token rewards, right? Are you potentially overpaying your user base, right? When you're overpaying, you're adding additional sell pressure to your token, and also, yeah, potentially, right, creating too profit focused of a mindset within your user base, right? And so it's a valid thing, right? But that's just incentive design, right? That's something that I think is like relatively well understood within crypto, and it's just like, okay, now we apply that, right? Like Gauntlet was just on the stage, right? So it's like, yeah, how do you make incentives more efficient?
I want to come back, Jin, because one thing that I know that you haven't mentioned is that you talked about AWS and developer angle, but I know for a fact that like Saga is pretty much one of the few chains that had a big presence at Gamescom, with the actual kind of retail gamers. Games being featured on IGN, on like Steam and Epic. So why not that story? Like, tell us a bit more about this. Like, instead of going for the crypto natives, we seem to be going for the actual gamers who are like new to crypto. So why that? And like, so why bring on that energy?
Well, so one of the things that we think about when we go out and talk to developers or game partners, for example, our big thing is we always tell them not to think about how to utilize Web3 within their games first. So a lot of pitfalls comes from people thinking that there is an existing kind of model that works and they're trying to bring into their game. So for example, you mentioned like proof of stake and then into your own games. Most of the times when game developers are trying to experiment with new ways of utilizing blockchain technology, if you anchor them into an existing sort of mindset, what ends up happening is that's all they think about. And we have an understanding, at least when we talk to game developers, is that the needs of the game developers and how Web3 can kind of fit into their games is all tailored very specifically for that game itself. It's very hard to take a cookie cutter approach and say, hey, this is the framework that you should look into for your game, because every game is different, right? Like a trading card game is gonna, for example, have a different kind of incentive structures in there, or like a looter shooter is gonna have a different kind of incentive. And so you can't really just go about and say this is the way they're gonna do it. And so from our perspective, our goal has always been, let's make the infrastructure as easy as possible for people to use, and then seed as much experimentation within our system as possible. And once you start building primitives for developers that allow them to start experimenting, then kind of like the magic of Web3 will automatically seep into that place. And I think it really is how DeFi kind of grew in blockchains as well, right? So DeFi, there wasn't like, hey, this is the correct way to do things. There was like a bunch of different ideas that people had, and then it coalesced into developing products over time that is now called DeFi now. But it wasn't like a concerted, hey, this is exactly how you do things. And so you really need that experimentation ultimately within our system, and that's kind of like the approach that we take.
Can I ask Sota now and pit you against that? Because we're talking about Sony. In a way, it feels like this is the corporate. This is the monolith, right? This is the mega power that will come in and try to use Web3 and like hopefully sincerely adopt it. That seems to go against what we're talking about here: crypto native approaches, experimentation, permissionless. Why Sony? Why go after that approach? What conviction do you have that like, hey, this is the path that like other people are not taking, and we will succeed because of that?
Yeah, sensitive question. I'm on behalf of Startel today here, but I'm partially belonging to Sony, but I'm speaking this on behalf of Startel. From my perspective, the industry is a little bit stagnating right now. So let's say 3 years ago, 4 years ago, one single transaction took $50 or $60 or even more, during the CryptoKitty era, for example. But right now, single transaction takes less than 1 cent, even Ethereum layer 2, thanks to a scalable solution, scalability solution, and multiple other layer 1s, right? But when we see our Web3's adoption rate in terms of the real world, even though we made thousands improvements in terms of the scaling, we don't see thousands times adoption of the Web3 today. I think it's because of distribution channel, and the society itself is not ready for the Web3. When it comes to society, there are a lot of the pillars: technology, regulation, and customers' acceptance of the Web3 technology. And still we are in the early stage, but without onboarding mainstream business, our industry remain the same. So this is my original problem statement. And this is the reason why one of our core value is GM. GM previously stands for good morning, right? Which represent underground culture of the Web3, which I like pretty much. But after Sonium, we're gonna go mainstream. Web3 should go mainstream beyond underground culture. And onboarding the traditional business and onboarding even the regulators are pretty much necessary in this space. And from Sony's perspective, I think Web3 technology is getting ready and ready. 3 years ago, Web3 technology is just too early to onboard a lot of the customer base on chain. Too early. Right now, the technology is improving and it's getting ready and ready. And right now, I think this is the right time for even big corporates to enter Web3. It's not fully ready, but once it is fully ready, a lot of people join. So right now, it's not 100% ready, but it's right time when it comes to technology readiness and regulation as well. The good thing is, I'm from Japan, so Japan government made Web3 as a national strategy back in 2022. And right now, a lot of the regulation, the tax has been already reformed, and the government actually pushing big company to work on Web3. So this is we have been creating this kind of narrative in the last 4 or 5 years. And finally, the times comes. So it's all about timing, I think.
So it sounds like if we envision Sonium as a city, then it'll be a lot of Japanese people and a lot of Japanese corporations actually running the city.
This is gonna be very global, global city. I mean, I think onboarding Japan is my minimum requirement. So this is gonna be the global chain from day one. And the problem is, we don't have diversity in a city. I mean, Web3 so far. But we're gonna onboard not only Web3 people, but also Web2 people, even people who does not care about technology. By doing so, we would like to make pretty much diversified city, consisting of multiple people who has different mindset, different religion, and different gender, age, and so on. Right now, Web3 is pretty much, when it comes to the category of the people, I think Web3 people is very similar, right? So we need a diversity.
I have a spicy take on this.
Go ahead.
So just a historical background. Tendermint, which is the consensus algorithm that powers Cosmos and all that, Tendermint was originally marketed and built for enterprise clients. And so the company All in Bits went through this cycle already of trying to onboard enterprise use cases onto blockchain. And what a lot of folks tend to forget is that big enterprises like that run very slow, right? And when you're trying to adopt kind of like a new way of using a technology, and a party that's notoriously slow is the death of its own adoption. Because one of the big things that that crypto right now is notoriously bad at is trying to make costs consistent and flat for any use case, essentially. So let's say pre-Sony, there is a certain amount of transaction and transaction fees are 1 cent, which is fine, which is today. And you're saying when Sony comes in, there will be it will still be 1 cent. It won't, right? It's naturally, Sony itself is going to strangle its own infrastructure and cause the demise of its own infrastructure. That's just generally how blockchains function right now because of the way that fee markets work. And so because of that, Web3 is not ready for this kind of mass adoption. It's just infrastructurally not ready yet, because anytime anyone gets a little bit of traction, it essentially will kill its own application itself. And so I think unless there's new primitives and new economic systems that make it a little bit easier to deal with this kind of scale, it's just not going to happen in my opinion.
You're gonna show your own gas-free.
Oh yeah, yeah, but that's a separate conversation. Yeah.
Well, there was the whole when I got into crypto, it was like 2017. There was the whole narrative around enterprise Ethereum, right?
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that was the thing, right? But even PayPal, right, Venmo, they've also integrated. But are they actually driving adoption? I think that's the question to think about, right? In terms of like maybe to be spicy, right? We're allowed to be spicy, right? It's like you have so you have like a slow, you have a corporates. Corporates are already slow, but then also like Japanese culture also is a little bit slow too, right? So you're kind of going double trouble, in my opinion. So I think like that's actually right, the friction that you will face. Actually, the rise of Axie Infinity was perhaps only facilitated because of Japanese regulation. There was actually a game that was very successful called My Crypto Heroes, and they could have been the inventor of play to earn, but actually it was illegal to emit ERC20 tokens in a game. Right, you could have NFTs, but you cannot have emission of ERC20 tokens. So you could play that game. You can earn NFTs. It was actually nice. People liked it, right? But it wasn't just as crazily viral, right? As okay, you use the NFTs to earn an ERC20. So we also have some past examples.
Yeah, let's have this panel discussion next week. I'm sorry, next year, and then I will prove, right? Next year, let's see. And one thing I would like to say is I would like to make this pie. I mean, Web3 market is bigger. And I would like to make the world where people are using Web3 in daily lives, Web3 for billions. This is our mission. And our mission is much bigger than our company's success, Sonym's success, Sony's success, and Japan's success. I would like to make Web3 for billions successful. So to achieve mission, regardless of our success or failure, we are going to make this industry forward. This is the important thing for us.
Yeah, that I agree with. I think
You agree?
Yeah, that I mean, experimentation is king. So I actually like what you're doing. I'm just skeptically in the background, but I like.
Yeah, let's see.
I'll let you do that experiment.
The next your time next.
Okay, as much as I love to dwell on this topic, and I feel we could be here for an hour, I want to pick another spicy point, which is security. Okay, when we think about app chains, it's like, is it L2? Is it L1? Is it a shared security chain thing?
Is it a meme?
Yep. And this is where Avril, I'd love for you to start. Right? Neutron is a shared security chain secured by the Cosmos Hub. And well, our fellow speakers here have different choices from like L1, L2, or like transitioning from one to the other, etc. So how do you think about this? And does it matter, or like to what extent does it matter? Like how does it change things for us?
I think like unless you're getting into like really specific, precise construct, like stake-share type of things, where you're like looking at exactly what the economic kind of like risk model is, and sort of like matching this with some like credible commitments in order to sort of like provide very granular kind of like economic guarantees. I think there's kind of like this threshold at which, just generally speaking, people consider the blockchain to be secure enough to interact with it, and this threshold might vary based on like what type of user you're interacting with, right? Like retail, generally speaking, won't ever look at the economic security of a chain and like think, oh, I'm gonna use or not use this chain based on that metric. But a massive fund, for example, might want to stay mostly to Ethereum because it feels that that's secure, and the rest it's not so sure about. And like, it also requires bridges and stuff, and like the bridges themselves, we're not so sure they're secure and stuff. So I think a lot of this today, at least, is very still kind of like qualitative more than quantitative. Like most people don't have like great heuristics for actually gauging what they consider secure or not. And so like, in that sense, I think like economic security is mostly a meme. I also think that like, one of the concerning but also very clear kind of like main benefit of restaking is it technically allows you to access, or at least have a credible path to have a high economic security for a much lower cost than if you were sort of like bootstrapping this from the ground up for yourself. And so, I think that's kind of like a sort of like fairly vicious value add, in the sense that like, you're kind of destroying your own business as long as the customers think about it this way, right? And so when it came to like Neutron's decision to go for this flavor of restaking, it wasn't really for the security, although knowing that your chain is going to be secure enough for most actors in the space to consider it secure, and for that not to be a question basically from day one, is like a good property, right? But beyond this, I think there's a lot of kind of like intangibles that are around it that are more interesting to like most of the projects that are considering like, you know, being an AVS or a rollup or whatever, right? And those are, okay, do I get better bridging? Do I get, you know, some sort of like political benefits? Do I get like liquidity injections? Do I get more, you know, composability or whatever that allows me to build a better product or bring my product to market more successfully, right? And so, yeah, that's kind of like what I think is more important in these conversations, right? I think like rollup to a large extent are actually more interoperability technologies than they are scaling technologies, in the sense that rollups themselves, at the end of the day, are just chains, but they have this nice validating bridge to Ethereum, which allows people to like, you know, both bridge and interact with these chains, but also have a high degree of comfort doing so, if that makes sense.
Guys, any response to that? I know we have a very diverse set here. The reason I bring it up is because earlier today, all the various panels we've been talking about like different ZK mechanisms, right? Like restaking and all that, and everybody's looking for like, hey, who's gonna use this stuff, like all different modular stacks, and like guys here, like we are the users. You guys are the ones who decide like, hey, this is the stack that I'm gonna use and to bring to my users, right? So how did you come to that decision? Doesn't matter. Like, what are the real considerations? Were what they discussing real or not?
Yeah, I think security is an interesting one. It's like, it's always like the quote I think I hear always is like, it doesn't matter until it does matter, right? And one of the things that I'm going to take a...
Well, actually, is there any example of economic security in the space actually mattering?
Yeah, I would say Terra is a really good example of an economic system that...
No. That's not what I'm saying. Economic security as in proof of stake, like the value stake being, like, is there any 51 attacks or like 2/3 threshold kind of like attacks that you know of in the crypto story?
Oh, I see.
That like economic attacks against the protocol itself? Because I agree, like Terra is a massive crash, but it's not caused
yeah,
by crypto
actually, a little bit. So it's not chains. This is why I'm abstracting this away. But there's a lot of bridge hacks, essentially, which is, if you think about it, is the same as proof of stake, except there's just a multi-sig, right? So at the end of the day, there are. It's just it's not directly a proof of stake system, yes, but the mechanism is similar.
Yeah, but it's not an economic attack. It's like, oh, the keys were on a server, the server got compromised. I used the keys to like sign a message that was fraudulent, and then I took the money.
Yeah, but that's exactly what that's the same thing.
No, that's not crypto economic security. That's
you
just
mean like
OPSEC.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
I mean, no, obviously. There hasn't been, but that doesn't necessarily mean that. So here's the confusing part about security that, in my opinion, that makes it a little bit difficult. Is in at least in Cosmos land, it's like finality is like the basis of what we've built, and so everything is always final, which is like means security-wise there isn't really a problem because you have a clock that sets your finality essentially. I think the bigger problem in general security comes in, and this is like pretty obscure, and it's like pretty irrelevant, but the Ethereum design of probabilistic security is what it kind of, there might be more rooms of error essentially. And yes, there hasn't, then this is what I mean though, like when I say it's not an issue until it is an issue, it's like we are at the it is not an issue stage, right? And as soon as something does happen, cascading security problems is something that can happen in a probabilistic security scenario. And so, as I said, for most people out there, it does not. It's like irrelevant, and I think that's true. But I had a point originally before.
Sorry about that.
No. I would say the big thing about security is it really only matters as long as security is hard to get. And what I mean by that is, back in the day, up until even now, getting security for your chain was difficult. There was like a lot of steps you need to take. You have to go, in a proof of stake system, you have to go get a staking token. You have to like derive value. You have to get validator set.
I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are running out of time.
Oh, right, okay.
Sorry, no, you can continue, but I have to go. So maybe can I say the last comment first and then go? Okay, yeah. Thank you very much for. And sorry for the.
No problem.
My last comment is we are still very early stage, and the Web3 have to prove ourselves. I mean, this industry have to prove ourselves. Otherwise Web3 can be the toy for the tech people and the geek rich people. So yeah, I feel very strong social responsibility to make it happen. And we would like to make the pie bigger through collaboration instead of the competition. So I hope I can work with you guys. Yeah, and thank you very much for having me. But I have to go. So yeah, thank you very much. Sorry for the interruption.
Before you go,
Bye bye.
thank you for all your spicy takes. You have to bring a chili.
That's a real life example of MEV.
Yeah.
All right, guys. We are actually running out of time, so let's try to wrap up here. I love that we have. Oh, what? Okay. Sorry. I love that we have very different takes on how we get to the path of adoption. And I think one concept that Vitalik recently wrote about, which is then plurality, right? And how we are able to then be inclusive of all these approaches. And the spirit of being a permissionless ecosystem is that, hey, yeah, everybody can go ahead and try all these things. And the good thing about going after users and use cases is that the evidence is very clear. Which we will then see, right, as we try to get more people and assets and volume on our app chains. So why don't we conclude with then one thing that just to recap then the spirit of like what is your path, right? And then like while we celebrate all paths, summarizing your conviction of the path to adoption in one line.
Build better products and distribute them, I guess.
For us, the way that we see it, right, is like we built one game, and then we built the infrastructure for that game to scale that game. Then we prove it out. Then we are able to onboard multiple games, right? And then once we have many games, we have a social and economic system, right? Culture that's been formed. This is forming, right? If you go to the Philippines, you go to Argentina, you meet our player base, you can see that these are real people who are friends with each other and are also building complex economic relationships with people all over the world. So then once you have that, so you bootstrap that network via something that's approachable to everyday people. And then, right, you're able to finally fulfill the promise of crypto, right, which is to create this borderless financial system that connects millions of people in an economic way that was not previously possible, right? So our focus is bringing crypto to the people that actually need it the most, right? And that's actually different. And this is the big disconnect that we see in the space. The capital allocators are living in right, the East, right, like I guess East Asia, as well as the West. But the people who are able to actually benefit from this technology in more of a consumer way right now are in emerging market countries, places like South America, places like Southeast Asia. And so we are actually part of that, right, where we're bridging that gap. But that's, I believe, where a lot of the work remains to be done, right, where there are two kind of echo chambers, or two groups of users and investors within crypto, and they're very, very, very isolated from each other, right? So that's why in the East right now, right, the capital allocators and the speculators, the investors, they feel a little bit despondent, right? Because they will look around and say, where are the users, right? But, well, their social circle is trading meme coins on Solana, right? They're totally disconnected from the people who are actually using the technology on an everyday basis, right? And we even, in Singapore, I say we, I want to be Singaporean one day. In Singapore, right, we can even fall victim to that, right? But luckily, if you go to the Philippines in November, go to the YGG Summit, you will see the people who are actually using this technology already.
Thank you, Joe. More than one line, but very.
I'll keep it to one line. I think I said it earlier. It's maximizing experimentation. So even to reaching out to different markets, it's if experimentation is just not there, and the product doesn't support that ultimately, then you can't build products for different niche markets if your product is designed only for one, essentially. And so from our perspective, make it as easy as possible and promote as much experimentation. That's going to be our goal ultimately.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. I know I love the disagreements and at the same time, the fact that all of us are pushing for crypto adoption. So thank you very much. And, well, I have to award each of us some spice for our incredible
us?
contributions.
All right.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank
Is
you
that
for,
the punishment for going over time?
Oh, thank you for courage to be spicy. Jared, this is not a problem for you, right?